to another episode of Film Seizure at the Movies. I am Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the weekly podcast Film Seizure and host of Monster Mondays, both of which you can find at filmseizure.com. This time, I'm finally making good on the promise that I made at the start of 2020 before we, as a general public, knew anything of the word COVID-19 or the unfortunate dangers of a global pandemic, the likes of which, well, we hadn't seen in a century. I'm finally reviewing the brand new James Bond film, No Time to Die. I also just want to say this right off the top here. There are going to be no spoilers in this review. I will talk about the movie on a high enough level to where I can make reference to things without spoiling it for you. So fear not if you are listening to this, but not sure if you want to know the movie beat by beat. No spoilers. Now, if you go to filmseizure.com or check the description of this very podcast you're listening to, you can find my written reviews of all the previous 24 James Bond films and their music. I then plan to review this film at the end of that to make the final reviews of the Bond series as we know it, at least for the foreseeable future, to make a nice round 50 reviews. Then I was going to do some rankings. I did the rankings, sans No Time to Die. I just had to throw together a couple of other rankings for my top villains and top pre-title sequences to round everything out. But all good things to come to those who are patient, I suppose, and I had to be very patient. Not since the black hole that was the 6.5 years between License to Kill and GoldenEye did I have to wait this long for a new Bond film. Sure, we had 4-year waits in between Die Another Day and Casino Royale, then another 4-year wait between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, but this wait felt more painful. At least shortly after License to Kill, I could say, well, you know, it didn't do so well at the box office, even though I really freaking love that movie. Maybe they just have to figure something else out after so many years of banging on as hard and as fast as they could to really get movies out pretty much every 2 years. Then you'd hear about the financial issue, not with Eon Productions. They were doing great, but with their primary distributor, MGM UA. There was a sort of peace to the idea that, yeah, maybe Bond was a thing of the past that died with the 80s. But then, in 1994, rumblings of what would become GoldenEye started, and Bond was reborn for the 90s and beyond. This time, though, gosh, it was there. We knew it was finished. It was in the can. All it had to do was get into theaters. We needed a little bit of course correction for the sort of thud that was Spectre. All it had to do was get out into the theater. But no, first Daniel Craig was injured, so that pushed the movie from the holiday 2019 release schedule that the series had kind of made a home in since 1995 into the spring of 2020. Then COVID. It got pushed at least 3 more times from the fall of 2020 to the spring of 2021 to finally October 2021. So here we are. Finally. In a way, it was kind of like dragging out the eventual breakup because this is ultimately a goodbye to Daniel Craig. We've gone through this before as Bond fans, but never did it feel so stretched out and painful. But enough about this recent history stuff that everyone knows about. Is No Time to Die good? Is it a proper send-off for Craig? Of the 3 previous Bonds who had planned final outings, Connery with Diamonds Are Forever, Moore with A View to a Kill, and Brosnan with Die Another Day. None of those are very good movies. Could Daniel Craig break the curse? And for the most part, yes. No Time to Die features some of the better things in the Craig era. First and foremost, Craig feels completely comfortable in the role as Bond. For a large part of this movie, Bond is a free agent, and he's a bit rudderless as a person. His moral compass is all over the place. It feels a little bit like an indictment of how government agents with these quote-unquote licenses to kill are kind of built by their professions, kind of chewed up and spit back out by the system. You're always looking over your shoulder. You can be crass. You can be a little bit of a guy on a death wish. You can kind of be completely and totally unlikable at times. But if we really think about the Daniel Craig era, it's about a guy who just cannot catch a break. He loses lovers. He loses his boss just as he recognized her as a parental figure. He leaves his job all the time. He's a guy who was raised an orphan, but then had a foster brother who's an evil mastermind. So yeah, Craig in this movie is pure id as Bond. He is a reckless drunk. He's more than happy to potentially thwart two global powerhouses' plans with the primary plot in this movie. There are a handful of scenes in the first half of this movie that are just the best of Craig's era. He has scenes with Jeffrey Wright and Ana de Armas that are so full of life and excitement that I would have loved an entire movie with that particular plot line. They bring out so much in Daniel Craig too that elevated his performance. In addition, Léa Seydoux, which I think that's how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if I didn't get that right, but she's really almost angelic in this movie. Now, 6 years ago, in Spectre, I wasn't a huge fan of her Madeline Swan character. Maybe I was being a bit too hardline that only Tracy and or Vesper could be Bond's true love. However, I really can't deny the fact that she's just has a very unique look that you find yourself kind of stuck almost looking at her for a while. And she's portrayed and shot so well in these two movies that she's been in now that you finally just say that, yeah, you get it. You get why she's the one that Bond has fallen in love with. Now, I mentioned how Madeline Swan is shot being a major win in the positive column for this movie. And it can be said that since Skyfall, there are no movies that look quite like Bond movies these days. This film in particular was shot by Linus Sandgren, who won the Oscar for Best Cinematography for La La Land. And there are lots of usage of location and various types of landscape in various angles that are just simply stunning. What the iris of the gun barrel opening kind of melds into and focuses on is a overhead shot of a remote Norwegian landscape in the wintertime, and it's just simply perfect. It's just this brisk white and it's almost like a void, and we see that same place later in what appears to be spring or summer, and it's utterly transformed but no less beautiful through Sandgren's lens. The whole open space of that landscape juxtaposed with the relatively claustrophobic closeness of our main villain's lair is amazingly well done. And it really kind of helps ultimately tell the story in a way that it feels like you're going from this wide open beginning to a very, very narrowed ending. Obviously, some of that credit goes to director Cary Fukunaga, who does a really pretty good job here. He has a really good eye for what can build tension in a film. The opening scene absolutely plays to his strengths in the horror and thriller genres as well. Now, one of the other things this movie does quite well for longtime fans of the series is make many references to past movies. There are musical leitmotifs, and some of the design plays into stuff that we've seen in the past. We see paintings of past M's who have played the role dating back to the Connery and Moore eras inside the hallways of MI6. We hear familiar music cues, and even a second Bond theme is used in this movie. It's celebrating the richness of nearly 70 years of Bond as a character and 25 films across nearly 60 years. Even the title sequence wonderfully calls out references to things like Dr. No, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Casino Royale, and more. We even see a band on one of Felix Leiter's cigar butts that reads Delictados, which was mentioned in Die Another Day. These Easter eggs don't really get in the way. Instead, it's just part of the celebration of Bond that is present through a huge chunk of this film. In fact, those with deeper knowledge of Bond from the early days and even in Ian Fleming's work will have some very interesting thoughts on what our main villain, Safin, and who he may be more accurately based on, thanks to some of the really, really well-placed references and the design of his lair. Now, there are a couple of things that I am still left desiring a bit more out of. The third act has a great action sequence that is this great one against the world, guns a-blazing set piece for Bond. However, there are a few things that I feel are a bit off in the final act. Rami Malek is a great actor and is great in this as our lead villain. But his motivations are a bit murky when we get to the big Bond talks to the bad guy scene of this movie. I'm also not a huge fan of the theme song. Again, since Skyfall, it seems like every Bond theme needs to be this kind of weepy song full of emotion, which, Adele's theme aside, has come off extremely sleepy in Spectre and in this movie, No Time to Die. But now it comes to the final piece that I can't say too much about because of hefty spoilers. There are two things this movie has that will likely divide the audience. Some of the audience will have legitimate gripes and some won't. I mean, of course, we know that. The internet exists. Of course, some people will have some really butt-headed gripes. But to me, I'm mixed on one concept and really like the other, though I feel at times that the other one's a bit messy and not handled 100% as well as it could have, possibly due to scenes that were edited out or that fell through the cracks in rewrites and so forth. It's likely that one or both of these concepts will color the general audience's opinion quite heavily. It could lead to the film potentially not doing as well as it could have. I have a tad bit of concern over that, but maybe another time I'll write or release a spoiler-filled review that can go into that. Now, I do have one big gripe that I will discuss now, and there could be something to this that is either slightly unfair, but I think it's still important for me to say that I was very disappointed about. If this had come out when it was supposed to, this would not have been a gripe at all. But after being delayed due to COVID-19, you would have thought that producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli would have included a dedication to Sean Connery, who died about a year ago. It's not there. We do get our usual James Bond will return at the end of the credits, but nowhere in there is a mention of the passing of Sean Connery. Now, granted, I don't believe there was anything done for Roger Moore's passing, but still, this series would not have happened without Connery's portrayal of 007. In a film that is so heavily celebrating the character and the series, not having that dedication or memorial for the guy who is the first to play the part is really kind of tragic, in my opinion. I won't shame anyone for it because, yes, at one point it was stated that the film was locked down and forbidden for any changes to be added, but I kind of feel like the passing of Sean Connery feels like something they could unlock the canisters for. And I don't quite remember when Roger Moore passed away. It's possible that they could have dedicated the film to both of them, because obviously the series doesn't exist without Connery. The series wouldn't be quite the continued success as it was into the Gen X crowd and even the millennials without Roger Moore. So I don't know. I'm just a little disappointed that there wasn't anything like that. But anyway, it's inevitable when you have a new Bond movie come out for people to ask two questions. First, how does it rank with the guy playing Bond's other films? And second, how does it rank against all the Bond films? Well, what's my answer to these questions? Well, one is absolutely easier to answer than the other. First, it's solidly third place in Craig's era. Not being a huge fan of Spectre or Quantum of Solace in the James Bond lexicon, this easily outclasses those films. However, it doesn't really come anywhere near the power that Casino Royale and Skyfall had. As for how it ranks as a whole, I really don't know yet. This is not one of the best films in the entirety of the series. It's far from the bottom tier movies, but it's hard to rank this for a couple of reasons. Because it doesn't immediately strike me as one of the finest of the series, it needs time for it to live a little bit, which is kind of funny because I was told that it also has no time to die. So I guess I can afford it some time to live. But there are two major deficits that this movie has that kind of hurt Spectre as well. First, it's quite long and sprawling. At 2 hours and 45 minutes, it's really hard for me to think about wanting to watch this movie again before something like, say, Moonraker or From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die. You know, all these movies that are either tons more fun or not even 2 hours in length. It's hard for me to rank it above some that are instantly more nostalgic for me. While not every good movie needs to be instantly nostalgic for me to enjoy it, this was a movie that I can't promise I will ever get nostalgic for. Casino Royale and Skyfall were so powerful in what they wanted to achieve that they pretty much landed at the top tier of my rankings, like atom bombs, pushing everything else to the side. Would I rather watch this nearly 3-hour movie that most of the fun parts are front loaded, or would I rather watch a lesser entry that is far more nostalgic and heavy on the fun, like say Octopussy? It's hard to answer right now, and it's hard for me to give that answer. This movie has some very, very good things in it, but it's going to have a hard time finding its real place for a little while. After seeing the movie a few more times, letting it breathe and allow me to compare it to others, then I'll probably be able to better rank it against its brethren. Still, No Time to Die is a successful send-off for an experimental era of the James Bond series. It caps off a self-contained series of 5 interlocked films that tell a complete story of a version of James Bond. Whenever we get a new series, I would like to see the series go back to a more episodic series of adventures instead of the connected films. But I do think it kind of just matters more what is hot in Hollywood and what catches audiences' fancies more when it's time to return to the world of 007 than anything else. While I may have some issues with some of the pieces of the movie or the script, generally, there's a lot of very well-made pieces that does indeed celebrate Bond after 25 years. And like I said, maybe sometime down the road, I'll do a more spoiler-filled retrospective look at this movie with the rest of the series. But for now, I think it's time to close up shop on this review. You can check out new episodes of Film Seizure hosted by Jason Oliver, Chuck Moore, and myself each Wednesday morning, and new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon at filmseizure.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by just simply finding us at Film Seizure. You can also find us on several podcast platforms like SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Audible. You can even subscribe to us and find the show on YouTube if that's where you would like to listen to the 2 series that we have. Now, I'll be back for the review of Halloween Kills in about a week, which continues the Michael Myers and Laurie Strode tale from 2018's Halloween. Until then, don't forget to save me the aisle seat.